Hello and welcome to our first webinar partnership with Alumni Affairs and the Alumni Association and the Mindful Awareness Research Center. I'm Diana Winston. I'm the Director of Mindfulness Education at our MARC Center, Mindful Awareness Research Center. And I'm happy to be here with all of you to offer some tools for dealing with mindfulness, for using mindfulness to help us deal with difficult times. What I'm going to do today is it's just going to be an overview of what mindfulness is and some of the science behind it, so you can see how it's affecting our physical and mental health. And then we'll do some practices. So we'll start with the science, and then we'll do a couple of different practices that you can implement right away, practices that you can take home with you, keep home with you, and really ways of using mindfulness to support you during these times. And then I'll leave you with some resources. So I'm going to get started just by shifting over to a short PowerPoint to give you some information about, hold on one second, about mindfulness. So here we go. So introduction to mindfulness in an anxious age. Mindfulness is paying attention to our present moment experiences with openness, curiosity, and a willingness to be with that experience. So I'm giving you the definition right now in case some of you are not really clear about it, but it's really about how do we live in the present moment. So much of the day we're not in the present moment. Our minds are lost in the past and the future. And that's where a lot of the fear resides. The anxiety resides in our future worries and concerns and the things that we replay and the ruminations. And we're going to talk about how to bring our attention to the present moment for more health and well-being. So this practice originated in the monasteries of Asia. But now we've seen it was on the cover of Time magazine in the last number of years, and you may have seen this. Don Draper meditates. But mindfulness is now spreading. So it started out in these monasteries, but now it's spreading to many, many sectors of society. And we're seeing it in the workplace, and we're seeing it in education, higher education, and law, with first responders, with mental health, in healthcare, and much more. And it's very exciting for me, having observed this. I've been practicing this for about 30 years. And so to now see the many, many parts of our society that are saying, wow, mindfulness is really helpful, and are integrating and incorporating it in creative ways, it's just really, it's wonderful for me to see over these years. So, so mindfulness, what can it do for us? We know it's going out in the world. You've probably heard it. It's kind of a big buzzword. People are practicing it. Mindfulness has all sorts of potential for reducing stress and anxiety, improving attention, cultivating self-awareness and self-regulation, improving relationships, and it's a helpful self-care tool. And I know right in this moment, we need all the self-care tools we can get. And what I want to say right away that's important is mindfulness may not be for you. It's not for everybody. Just like one medication is not going to be helpful for every single person, mindfulness is something that some people are very drawn to, find it to be extremely helpful, and use it and practice with it. Others try it and they say, it's not my thing. So it's fine as we're exploring it today. If you feel very, if you're uncertain about it, or, I'm gonna give you tools to keep going with it if you want to, but as I said, it's not for everybody. And then as long as you do something that right now, particularly in these times, as long as you are doing something that supports you with self-care, that is the most important thing, whether it's mindfulness or not. So to talk a little bit about the research, the research is growing. It's very promising. There's a lot to do. There's probably about 6,000 or 7,000 studies in mindfulness right now, which is wonderful as well. But there's many more studies to be done, and years of work and research that we will uncover more and more benefits of it. In the meantime, we've seen that mindfulness can help with chronic pain. with insomnia, IBS, irritable bowel syndrome, cardiovascular health, and then with mental health concerns like anxiety, depression, and attention. I'll cover some of this right now. So looking at how it can impact uh, health conditions. So these are conditions connected to inflammation, and mindfulness has been shown to positively impact genetic markers of inflammation. So as we can see, the early studies that look at healing show that when we're under stress, our cortisol level rises, there's an inflammatory response, and our immune response is depressed. And I'm guessing right now that's what's happening for most of us. Meditation practices, and I'll talk about the difference. People ask the question between meditation and mindfulness. I'll get there in a little bit, but let's just say there's lots of meditation types, and many of them have the result of decreasing cortisol levels, reducing the inflammatory response, and boosting the immune system. So this was an early study done in the late 90s, and I just love it because it's one of the first times showing the impact of mindfulness on a health stress-related condition. So this is for people with psoriasis. Psoriasis, as we know, is that itchy skin condition. The typical treatment is almost like a tanning bed. You put your body in UVB ray light, like it's shown in the image. And so what they had people do was they had them meditate along with it, practicing mindfulness along with the typical treatment. And then the control group did the regular treatment. The people who practiced mindfulness, their skin cleared twice as fast. So it took them 30 days for their skin to heal instead of 60 days in the control group. So again, this is an early study. It has been replicated. And it's interesting to just see the mind-body connection and why this is important, and how, especially right now, having less stress in our mind is going to impact our bodies. So mindfulness is also helpful for mental health. And there is a whole cycle of anxiety and depression. I'll talk more specifically about anxiety, but just to say, one of the things that's happening when we're anxious is there's a lot of anxiety going on in our in our body, perhaps a lot of anxious feelings, and then we start thinking about it and trying to figure it out and solve it in order to soothe the feelings. And then that leads to more anxiety sensations in our body, which leads to more thinking, trying to soothe it. So one of the things that mindfulness is shown to do is it can impact this cycle of thinking by teaching us to come back to the present moment, to not be lost in these thoughts of the future that are often catastrophizing thoughts. And so I'll say more about this coming up, but just to say mindfulness has been helpful for working with anxiety. And there's over 50 studies showing that right now. And actually, I believe that's increased since then. There's quite robust research showing the impact of mindfulness on anxiety. Because it's so helpful, it's been incorporated into a variety of clinical treatments like mindfulness-based cognitive therapy, and that's primarily for depression, also being used with anxiety, acceptance and commitment therapy, used for anxiety, dialectical behavioral therapy, used primarily for borderline personality disorder. But you don't have to have a particular clinical diagnosis to do this practice. In fact, being anxious because we're in extremely challenging times, mindfulness can be very, very useful. And by the way, it's very normal if you're feeling anxiety right now. Anxiety, doomsaying, our minds go in all different directions. and some of us are in fear, and some of us are in denial, and some of us are feeling grief. And I just want to recognize that it's an appropriate response that we're having these feelings. Now, what we want to do is learn how to handle them so that we're not overwhelmed by them, but not to think that there's something wrong that you're having these feelings. It's appropriate. This was a study done in about 2011 looking at the impact of mindfulness on happiness. and how being in the present moment makes people happier. So this, what they did was they had about 2,500 people buzzed on their smartphones at various times in the day, and they were asked 3 questions. And the questions were, what are you doing? Is your mind on it? And how are you feeling? And so, or how's your mood? And so what they found when they looked at the data, the first thing they noticed was 49.6% of the time we're not in the present moment. That sounds about right. About half the time. Where are we when we're not in the present moment? Well, we're thinking about the past, or replaying it, we're planning for the future. What they saw with this study is that our minds tend to go to 3 different areas fairly equally. One area is pleasant things when we're not in the present moment. Another area is unpleasant things. And a third area is neutral things. So, oh, I have to do the laundry or something, just neutral things. So when our minds are wandering and we're not in the present moment, but we are thinking about something pleasant, that's fine. If you just had some enjoyable food or something and you're just replaying that, you're thinking about, oh, that chocolate chip cookie was great, you're feeling pretty good. But the other 2/3 of the time, people reported not feeling good. And that when our minds go to these places 2/3 of the time, we are reporting unhappiness. But if people were taught to come into the present moment, to be present, even if their tendency is to go into the past or the future, they reported being happier, even if they were doing things they didn't like. So let's say you don't like to wash the dishes, but you watch it with presence, with awareness, and you notice your mind going off into scary thoughts. You bring it right back to the feel of the water on your hand or your feet on the floor or the sound of the birds. If you can hear it, maybe you can. Then people reported happiness. Just a few more studies, and then in a moment we're going to get to the actual practice. This was a study done at the University of California in Santa Barbara, looking at people taking studying for the GREs, the graduate record exam. So it was with college students. And what they did was they had them go through a course of mindfulness, about 6 weeks. And at the end of the study, they compared how they did on the exam. And what they found was a 16 percentile point boost on the the reading portion of the GRE. So this is interesting, and let's think about why. If you're reading something that's interesting to you, that you like, it's very easy to stay present, to stay mindful, to pay attention. But if you're reading something that is boring or dense, it's really easy for your mind to wander. So when people were taught to pay attention, to come back to the present moment, well, let's just say this. Our whole lives, we tell our children, and we have been told, pay attention, pay attention, pay attention. But no one really tells us how to pay attention. So mindfulness is this invitation to pay more attention. And when we learn that skill, people's ability to be mindful on these reading exams improve. So mindfulness, we also did studies at UCLA looking at adolescents with ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, or without the hyperactivity at UCLA. And we did adolescents and adults and found a significant improvement in what's called conflict attention. Conflict attention is when you're paying attention to one thing. Let's say you're noticing my hand, and then all sorts of things are distracting you, right? Conflict, it's very hard if you have ADD. But people improved their ability to stay aware of my hand or of what they were focusing on. And I'll show you as we continue on, you'll understand how we'll learn that through mindfulness. Mindfulness is also helpful it has an impact on our brain. And so this is interesting because these studies compare advanced meditators with people who are of the same age range. Because I'm not sure if you know this, as you age, your brain thins out. Did you know that? If not, now you have something else to worry about. It's called age-related cortical decline. What they did in this study is they compared advanced meditators. These are the people who've been in caves for 30 years or something, and they studied their brains, practicing mindfulness regularly. And they noticed that, as you can see in the slide, or it's probably a little hard to understand, but basically, the prefrontal cortex and the insula cortex were impacted. The prefrontal cortex and this is thickness. So the blue dots were thicker in the meditator, and I don't know if you can see the bottom, but this is age over time. And this is people who don't meditate, the red dots. The prefrontal cortex was thicker. It had more neurons there. Why is this important? This is important because the prefrontal cortex is what we think of as the CEO of our brain, right? It's responsible for executive functioning, for delayed gratification, for working memory, for impulse control. All of these things are so important, and it also is connected to how we regulate and manage our emotions. So and just to say very briefly, that was done with advanced meditators. They did more studies looking at novice meditators and found similar changes in different parts of the brain that are listed here in people who had just practiced 8 weeks, 27 minutes a day on average. We can change our brain. I know this is sort of an odd slide, but the scientists used to think that we were stuck with what we got. Once we hit about 25, that was it, the brain stopped developing. Now that science has long ago been disproven, but so we know that our brain continues to change over time and age, depending on what we do with it. So if you think you're someone who doesn't have very good attention, you develop it. If you practice it, you can create new neural pathways to improve your ability to pay attention, for instance. I think that's the last one, just to say that some studies show that mindfulness creates more pro-social behavior, more altruism. And I bring this up in these kind of peculiar times where we're wondering, are people going to be at their best? And this study had people coming in who had gone through a 6-week mindfulness program, ostensibly to be tested on how the results of the study, but actually the real test was in the waiting room. They had 2 people sitting in chairs, a 3rd chair unoccupied that the subject went to sit in, and then a person showed up with a leg in a cast. And the question was the mindfulness person going to give up their chair? And as you can see by the slide, 50% of the people did in the first study that they did with it, compared to 16% in the control group, 37% in this compared to 14%. So this is interesting, right? This is interesting just to see that we have the capacity. Mindfulness can build kindness, compassion, and again, to remember about all of the research that I've just gone over with you. It's just the beginning. There's so much more to do. It's very promising. But what's most important is how it impacts us. The research is exciting, but let's see about how it affects ourselves personally. So I'm now going to, I forgot to mention, we've done a lot of studies at UCLA, and I'll just quickly mention them. Some with children, some looking at insomnia. One of our really wonderful studies looked at the improvement of insomnia in symptoms in older adults. We've done one for years on looking at younger breast cancer survivors. We're doing one for Alzheimer's caregivers. And there's a lot of studies going on in our center at UCLA right now with the Cousin Center for Psychoneuroimmunology. Okay, mindfulness. Paying attention to our present moment experiences with openness, curiosity, and a willingness to be with that experience. Much of the time, we're lost in the past or the future. So we've been talking about this the whole time, right? And I know right now we're going into how long is this going to last? What's going to happen to my family? Economic worries, health worries. This is happening all the time. I'm wondering if this looks familiar to you, and perhaps this seems mild compared to what's happening right now. I often tell my students one thing that I say is very important, which is never believe anything you think in the middle of the night. It's always distorted, right? It's always a little bit odd or distorted. So mindfulness we're lost in the past, lost in the future, can bring us into the present moment. Mindfulness also counteracts automaticity. So the sense of like going through life, I don't know if the robot's the best image, but the sense that we're constantly, just going through the day and we don't have time to appreciate our day and we miss our lives. You ever get in the car and get out of the car and have no idea what happened in between? Well, this is very, very common, right? And what many people are saying right now that I find quite interesting is how, because our lives are so slowed down and all our demands are limited in a certain way. Although this is not to say we don't have huge amount of dealing with kids and work and all of that, but people are talking about slowing down. We're not rushing to get anywhere these days. And so people have said to me, I sat in the garden and I just appreciated the birds for the first time in years. Or I'm walking down the street and neighbors are waving at each other and I'm noticing the sky in a new way. And that is mindfulness, right? That's when we're showing up for our life, when we're not being on automatic pilot. People who practice mindfulness regularly report more gratitude, more ease, more well-being. So more appreciation of life. It's also something we already know and experience. And I want to just really impart this to you because it's not some mystical thing. Yes, it came to us from the Buddhist countries of the East, but it is something that is part of what it means to be human. And so if you think about children and how children are, in some ways, little kids are so fully in the moment, right? They're just they're just really present. And I remember when my daughter was little and we'd be walking down the street and I'd be asking her to come and hurry up. And she wanted to look at everything and just really show up for life. Well, I have news for you. We were all like that. But what happened? We had our difficulties in life. Things happened. We grew up, we got educated, we had other priorities. The mindfulness, in some ways, is really just giving us tools and skills to return to something that we already know, something about who we are, that's part of what it means to be a human being, this capacity to be present and connected and at home inside ourselves. And that we can find that even in these challenging times. I know it feels impossible right now. It's just it feels beyond the scope. Like, how can I manage my anxiety? How can I find a place of ease? But what I am telling you is there is a peace that is available inside us that's not dependent on the conditions of our outside experience, that it comes from within. It's an inside job. And so tools like mindfulness and other types of meditation and other things will be helpful for you in these times. Okay, so I'm going to just hold on one last slide. Okay, I'm going to stop the share and come back on for you all. And what I'd like to do now is simply to practice together. So I want to offer you a basic mindfulness practice, the foundational practice that I teach for everybody when they're getting started. And this is it's an emphasis on focusing our attention, learning to focus our attention, learning that when our attention wanders away into the past or the future, into spacing out or whatever happens, that we can come right back. And so we just keep doing this again and again, and I'll be guiding you through this meditation. So if you wouldn't mind, hopefully you're in a comfortable posture. You can settle back. If maybe you're on the chair, you could be on a couch, bed, on the floor, wherever you feel you want to be right now for the next about 10 minutes. So you can, if you're sitting up in the chair, just the encouragement is to have your back somewhat upright. You don't have to be rigid or tight, but upright is good. And your hands can be resting wherever they're comfortable. My eyes are closed right now, but you don't have to meditate, practice mindfulness with your eyes closed. You can keep them open if you wish. Most people prefer to close their eyes, but if you want to open them, you would just have them looking downward, not all around the room. And let's begin with a few deep breaths. And as you take these deep breaths, I just invite you to settle in, dropping whatever has been causing you causing you a lot of agitation. If that's possible, just almost imagining putting it aside just for right now. It may not be possible, but just coming into this present moment. We can feel our feet on the floor. And I encourage you to feel your feet, like really just notice. Notice the feeling of your feet as they touch the floor. Maybe they're on your bed or something, but where do you feel the feet making connection with something solid? And you're in a room. So imagine that although we don't feel it, that the earth is below and the earth is holding and supporting us. And you can just feel there might be some tingling or warmth or heaviness or hardness, just to feel what is present. Let yourself be held by the ground. And I just want to say that anytime you are feeling a little anxious or overwhelmed, just come back to your feet. Come back to your feet. Feel your feet supported on the ground. And we can notice our legs. Our legs make contact with the chair, or the couch, or the bed. Just feeling the weight, the pressure. Also feeling the support here. If you're seated, how the seat of your chair or the furniture is holding you. You can notice the back of your body. Like, how do you feel your back makes connection with the furniture or wherever it is? Some people may be sitting cross-legged, and I really don't feel that that is necessary to meditate. If you like it and you want to try it or do it, that is absolutely fine. But just keep it whatever's going to be comfortable for you right now. Supportive. Bring your attention to your stomach area. Is your stomach tense or tight? And if it is, see if you can take a deeper breath. So the science shows that how the importance breath, of breath awareness, of helping us to relax ourselves and relax the nervous system. So just allowing a breath or two, but not too many, just a few. Especially if you're noticing tension, tightness. And bring your attention to your hands. What do you notice there? Tingling, warmth, coolness. Let your hands be soft. And notice your arms and shoulders, softening your shoulders. Notice your chest and throat and face, softening your facial muscles. soft jaw. And then notice your whole body present. Just your whole body present. Now let's turn our attention to sounds. So turning your attention to the sounds around you in the room, wherever you are, listening to the sounds as they come and go, as if you're listening to music that you really enjoy. Just bringing this curiosity, this openness. People think you have to be in a completely quiet place to practice mindfulness, but actually, no. It's fine to do it in sound, in a noisy place, or even with just the normal ambient noise, because we can listen to the sound. See if you can listen to the sound without getting lost in a story about it. I like it, I don't like it. What is it? Just listening. Now turn your attention away from the sound back into your body and notice where you feel your body breathing. Where do you feel your breath moving through your body? Is your abdomen rising and falling? So just bring your attention to your abdomen area. Can you feel the rising and falling of your abdomen? So at this point, let your breath be in its own natural rhythm. No need to lengthen it. Just noticing the breath rising and falling, expanding and contracting. And you should be breathing in and out through your nose. And then shift attention to your chest area. Can you feel your chest rising and falling, expanding and contracting with each breath? And now shift your attention to your nose. Can you feel the air moving through your nose, through your nostrils, tingling, warmth, coolness, slight movement? What's helpful with this meditation is to find something to focus on, to pick something that feels the most obvious or the clearest. So you can choose your breath in your abdomen, your chest, or your nose. Or if you liked listening to sounds, which we did before, you can do that. So choose whichever was felt the most interesting to you. And they all work equally well. So just pick something. And now we're going to begin the process of paying attention to the present moment, breath after breath, or sound after sound. One breath ends, the next breath begins. Sounds coming and going. Just pick something if you can't decide. Now, as you do this, what's likely going to happen, and it's probably happening for most of you, is your attention will start to wander. Thoughts will come in and grab you, planning, imagining, worrying, remembering, or you might just sort of drift off and kind of space out. When this happens, you're not doing anything wrong. It's completely normal. It's what our minds do. So when you notice your attention has been pulled away, there'll be a moment that you notice it. That's actually a moment of mindfulness. You can say a soft word in your mind, like thinking or wandering, and then gently redirect your attention back to your main focus. And then you just keep doing it, coming back again and again. Every time your attention wanders, you just bring it back. Come back to what it was you were paying attention to. You may have to do this dozens and dozens of times. And that's how we train our attention. As you're doing this, other things may happen. So maybe you're noticing the breath and sounds will happen outside, or you'll feel sensations in your body, maybe even uncomfortable sensations like pain, or you might have an emotion arise, or some particular thinking that really grabs you. So if it's all in the background, just let it stay in the background. Maybe you're getting sleepy or restless. But if it becomes really obvious and it pulls your attention away from your focus, then notice it for a little bit. Include it. Oh, there's some discomfort here. Just being present with it in a kind way, or listen to the sound for a moment. And then just keep coming back to your main focus. Keep coming back. So I'm going to be quiet for about, let's say, 2 minutes while we practice this on our own. See what happens. Now let's bring our attention back into our bodies and just to notice how your body is doing as we end this meditation. Notice if you feel more peaceful, at ease, calm. Also notice how your mind is and your emotions. Are you feeling more present, more connected? And you may or may not be. So if you are, really enjoy that quality of peace or ease. And if you're not, notice how you are doing, letting whatever is here be here. And this too is mindfulness, being present with what is. So let's notice our feet for a moment. Feel the support of your feet on the ground. And then, whenever you're ready, you can open your eyes or end the meditation. And just kind of noticing, maybe looking around the room wherever you are to orient yourself and come back. So, thanks for practicing with me. I want to address what I think are some of the most obvious, or not obvious, but the most predominant questions that people have when they first practice mindfulness. And one of them, I'm guessing some of you got sleepy. And the reason I'm sort of joking is because a lot of people get sleepy when they meditate, and just to know it's really, really normal. Uh, Probably, especially now, we're not getting enough sleep and we're stressed out. And so, this is an opportunity to um, have a little bit of a rest. It's not the worst thing. But we can practice, we can open our eyes if you notice you're getting sleepy. You can even stand up and continue the meditation. And I'm going to give you suggestions for practicing at home. So, we'll talk about ways that I suggest that you practice at a time of day you're least likely to be sleepy. But I used to teach mindfulness at UCLA when I had an aunt who was in her 80s who would come to my classes, and she had terrible insomnia symptoms, but she said she got the best sleep of the week in my class, which I thought wasn't too bad. So some of you might have experienced sleepiness, and some of you might have experienced the opposite. And that opposite is your minds were all over the place, and your body might have felt kind of antsy, and you didn't know, can I stay? Can I sit here? If you're experiencing that, again, completely normal. This is what happens. We have human minds that have been trained for 20, 30, 40, 70, 80, however many years to be distracted. So when we teach ourselves to come to the present moment, it's not the first thing we're going to do. We're going to continue to be distracted. And additionally, humans are biologically wired to search for threats. It's how our species survived. I was teaching mindfulness meditation for a couple of months ago in the Museum of Natural History. I was invited for an event they had there, and I was in the dinosaur room teaching. And so I looked up and I told everybody look up, and we could see the dinosaur skeletons. And I say, this is why your mind is wandering. You were escaping these guys. So, so it's normal. But here's the good news. Remember that neuroplasticity slide? Right? If you practice it, it gets easier. Just like anything, if you practice an musical instrument, if you keep practicing, it will get easier to do. The same with the mindfulness, it improves over time. Um, and some of you may have experienced feeling pretty calm and relaxed, and this was helpful. And so I'm just going to encourage everything we learned here today, take it home with you. And I'll talk about how to develop a practice at home. Some of you might not have felt that, might have felt more anxious. And so there are a couple of things. Mindfulness, you don't have to do a long amount of mindfulness. You could just spend A minute or two. And if a minute or two is calming, but beyond that, it feels too much, that's fine. Just start where it's easy. There's also ways of bringing mindfulness into your daily life that I'm going to share with you that may be helpful for those of us who thought, oh, I actually didn't feel more calm. But in the long run, if you practice it, you will learn tools for being present with whatever you're experiencing, even the difficult emotions. And there's a lot, it's not immediately obvious how to do it. I'm going to give you a little bit today, but over time, as we build that capacity to be present with ourselves, just that returning to the present moment, when the emotions arise, we can also give attention to it. So if, let's say, there's some anxiety arising, we can notice what's happening in my body. My heart is racing, my stomach is clenched, my jaw is tight. Okay, being present with that and breathing and sensing. This skill is incredibly important because right now, and sorry, what I didn't say is as we breathe and sense, we calm down a little bit. The breath helps us calm down. We make space for it instead of running away from it or trying to distract ourselves. And there's more ease that's brought into our body and mind. This doesn't happen overnight. This doesn't happen with, my first day of practicing mindfulness. It takes time. So right now, it's really important that we develop practices to help us when our minds get out of control into the fears, the worries, the doomsaying, etc. But let me just say this, the beginning of it is starting with a daily practice. And I really recommend that if you like doing this, and of course it's for people who want to do it. If you don't want to do it, it's not going to work. To practice with it on a daily basis if you can. And I like to start people with 5 minutes a day. Everybody has time for 5 minutes, I think. Maybe not, but 5 minutes, we're just asking a little bit of time. One, it's very nurturing for ourselves, right? It's so important for ourselves. It's not just about, oh, I better do this in order to have skills so that I can handle life. That's a big piece of it. But it's good for us to do this. So, practicing on a daily basis, doing it at a time of day that's going to work in your life. I know that everybody's lives are really different. So, some of us it'll be in the morning before anybody else is up. Some of us it might be late at night, at the middle of the day. But just to give it a try when you know you're going to have some time that you can be with yourself for the 5 minutes. And then you can increase it to 10 minutes, 15 minutes, and more. I'll give you a resource at the end. We have an app, UCLA Mindful app, and it has 5 minute meditations. It has 3 minute meditations. It has many longer, much longer ones on it as well, but there's short ones and some guided practice on how to do this. So I'm going to go back to my screen share and um, oops, my screen share. Hold on. Sorry, give me a moment. Hmm. Should be, sorry. Not sure why it's not happening. I was waiting for something with technology to mess up here. I think you're seeing my screen. Can one of the people running this tell me that it's okay? All right. Okay, hold on, let me find out. Give me 1 second. See the mindfulness survey. Yeah, we don't want that. All right. If I can't get it to work, I'm going to uh, stop the share and I'll just keep talking about it. Okay. Okay, give me 1 sec. Now you can see it. It looks good? Okay, great. So, mindfulness. All right, here we go. Sorry, everybody. There are many types of meditation, right? And this is important. People were asking me, what's the difference between mindfulness and um, between mindfulness and other types of meditation. There's many types of meditation, just like there are many types of sports. So there's hundreds of types of sports. There's dozens and dozens and dozens of types of meditation. Mindfulness is one of them. And mindfulness and different meditations, they're all great. They cultivate different things. Mindfulness is the one that's gained a lot of popularity right now, and is people are really enjoying it. But of course, you may have other types of meditation that work for you. That's great. Um, So it's mindfulness is cultivated through a meditation practice, just like we did, but also it's a it's a quality of attention that can be developed at any moment. So this is what's really important during these times right now, is that we can bring mindfulness on the spot when we need it. So now you've seen what it is, you have a practice to cultivate it. But now what we want to do is how do we use it in the course of the day, because it's a quality of attention that can help us, especially when we go into the worst case scenarios that happen in our daily life. So so I'm going to offer you an acronym, and that acronym is something that I think is quite helpful, because being mindful isn't too hard. I hope you've seen that. What's difficult is remembering to be mindful. So this acronym is STOP, and it stands for stop, take a breath, observe, and proceed. And so if at any point you want to remember to be mindful, or you want to be mindful, or you notice that your mind has got off into worst case scenarios, or you're about to yell at your kids because you've been sitting in the house with them for days and they're driving you insane, or any of that, at any moment we can remember to stop. And all we do is we just remember to just stop, whatever, just stop very gently for a moment, take a breath or take several breaths. And as you take these breaths, just inviting in a little calm, and then observe what is happening inside me. Okay, my heart is racing, my stomach is clenched, I'm thinking about the future, I'm making myself feel bad. Okay, coming back to this present moment, taking more breaths and proceeding. So it's just, in a simple way, it's just stop, take a breath, observe what's happening, and then proceed. And so we can remember to stop. One of the things that I have noticed for me is when I when my mind goes into those kind of scenarios, is how do it's so important just to not let myself keep going there. One of the examples I'll often talk about is like our minds are like a train. So so our minds are like a train, and we're getting on the train and we're going like 20 miles, 30, 50 miles down the track, and suddenly we realize, oh, we've been on this train. And so what we invite you to do is just get off the train. When you realize you're on the train, can I get off the train? Can I stop, take a breath, observe, proceed? Or maybe not even get on the train in the first place. This is an interesting question, an interesting possibility. Maybe don't get on the train, stay at the platform. And this is what we can learn with mindfulness. One of the things I've been doing is when I notice my mind going into difficult places, I'll just pause for a moment and take a breath, and I'll say, how am I now? How am I now? And for the most part, now is kind of okay. It's not, I mean, I'm currently at this moment, my health is okay. My family is stable enough right now. So I just take that moment and pause, and maybe I'll look at the sky, or I'll look at something beautiful, or I'll just take a moment to pause and appreciate, how am I now? So we can include that with stop, and I want to try it with you right now. Um, okay, hold on, just double checking. Okay, so wherever you are, don't know what's happening in your mind or where things are going, but I just invite you to stop and take a breath. And your eyes can be opened or closed. It's up to you. And now let's observe what's happening inside me. My heart's racing, my stomach is clenched, there's heat in my face. Or maybe not. Maybe I'm just peaceful right now, just to observe for a moment and then proceed. And here we are, proceeding. One more time, we stop. We're in the midst of life. We stop, we take a breath, and just observe, how am I now? How am I now? Okay, there might be a lot of activity in my body and mind, but I can be okay. I can be okay. I can come back to the present moment. Feel your feet on the floor. Come into this present moment and proceed. And we proceed with more awareness and more kindness. So, this is a practice you can do for 10 seconds in the middle of your day. This is a practice that anybody can do to bring in mindfulness, and you can couple it, if you want, with doing the meditation practice. So this is very much an introduction to mindfulness. I wanted to get you just to have a sense of what are the practices that are like, what are practices that are available right here and now for those of you who are just starting out, what the science looks like, so you can see that it is something that it might be worth pursuing. And I want to leave you with a set of resources so that you can keep going. Now, I know I received a lot of questions, and I got probably about 200 questions plus, and I obviously did not answer them. I hope I answered a lot of them through the presentation that I did. But there were questions about working, what should we do with our children? And there were questions about, I'm on the front lines. How does this apply? And I actually think it does. Our children can practice stop. We can be, I'm not going to answer these questions, it's beyond the scope, but just to say all of these tools can help us in whatever situation we're in. Because we're in tight quarters for some of us with other people, and we need to manage our emotions. So can we stop? Can we breathe? Can we practice more and more peace and well-being in our lives? And this is so important. So we can be models of peace in the midst of the day, in the midst of our lives that we're trying to create for our families and for each other. So I'm going to just give you a couple of resources to continue on. This is just a little bit about our center, which is at UCLA, where we foster mindfulness education mindful awareness through education and research to create a more compassionate society. And it's really a vision of radical accessibility, bringing our practices to all, regardless of background and means. Our center has lots of different public programs. It trains teachers. We do research. We have online education, and I want to share that particularly right now because this is when we need it. We have a free drop-in every Thursday at 12:30. I was teaching at the Hammer Museum, and we're now turning that into a virtual drop-in. So 30 minutes of meditation, please join. We're going to be offering a lot more of those coming up. Just to say, there's tons of great resources out there. That is not what UCLA is offering, but you'll hear the UCLA ones. We offer online classes, mindful awareness practices. We have a basic one to give you much more depth as into what I did today. That'll give you more depth. It's over 6 weeks. We have other topics I wrote here: turning obstacles into allies, opening to forgiveness, working with difficult emotions, and cultivating positive emotions. We're starting this week. We have online mindfulness home retreats that support to do a mindfulness retreat in your home. Now, I know some of you have experience, and this might be, or even you just want to try it a day. I mean, we have a lot of time on our hands, some of us. So a day of or 2 or 3 of practice, and that's all on the Mark website. We have the UCLA Mindful app, and I mentioned the resources on our website. That's our app, available wherever. My 2 books right here, Fully Present and The Little Book of Being, which has lots of short practices that you can do just in the midst of your day. And then that's the website for our center, and all these resources are available to you. And hopefully there'll be more opportunity to partner with alumni, with the Alumni Affairs and with all of us to develop more for you. And this is just a taste of mindfulness. And I just really want to take this last 1 minute. Let me double check my time. Oh, it's time. It's time. But let's just take one last minute to take a breath together. And just, I want to invite you to offer some kindness to yourself in whatever way makes sense to you. Just imagine, how can I be kind to myself in these times? Right this moment, how can I be kind to myself? We're going through a lot. And we can imagine the kindness coming out from us out into the world. And that we're sending kindness and compassion and care and resiliency to so many people who need this in these times. Thank you for joining me today, and I wish you the best. Take care.